Hello, Booknerds. We all have been fascinated by the Mahabharata growing up, and just like any other millennial, I have always been fascinated by the stories from Mahabharata. But there are several stories which did not take the forefront in what we saw on TV in the 80s and 90s. And one of them is the story of Satyavati. And I have been reading about the story, which is kind of an origin story in this book. It's called Satyavati by Rupeen Popat. The subtitle says The Queen Who Shaped the Destiny of the Kurus. And boy, she did. From being a very humble fisherwoman, taking passengers from across the river, and to the top ranks of Hastinapur, where a lot is happening. And this story has got so much to offer, and Rupeen has done total justice to it. He talks about Bhishma, the enigmatic character, a demigod who has done so much for Hastinapur, but he takes a vow and everything changes till even, very late in the Mahabharata when the Kurukshetra war starts. Besides that, there's a lot about how, Satyavati brings on board his long lost son, sage Vyasa, so that the lineage of the Kuru dynasty keeps on going, and many other characters which are in the book quite fascinating. The very amazing character of Parshuram, and there's a whole fight sequence with Parshuram and Bhishma. It was a lot of fun, and of course later in the book we also get to knowing a little bit about the Pandavas and Kauravas. A lot of magic, some war, revenge, vows that are kind of changing everything. The book is so much fun. I had the opportunity of speaking to Rupeen on the Booknerds podcast about his novel, his debut novel, Satyavati, and we discussed everything that I just disclosed and much more. We also talked about how Shakuni influenced Dhritarashtra, and a lot of other things about mythology, about his views on mythology, how mythology should be. Should people take creative freedom while writing mythology? So all of that, just watch the podcast and let us know in the YouTube comments whether you liked it or not. Tell us more about Bhishma and what's happening in the narrative.
So Bhishma is the crown prince. He's the definition of what you would call the people's champion. Okay. He was basically very well educated in every art, political, and how to rule. As a warrior, he was second to none. Absolutely none. Okay? There's nobody on earth that could rival him in his youth in particular. He was the ideal choice to be a king. And that for various reasons that doesn't quite work out, which you can read in the book. He's a very tragic individual. And as the story develops, later into the Mahabharata, when we get towards the war and stuff like that, you can see that he makes this particular vow, and it may make sense, it may make somewhat of a sense in the early days, but sometimes that truth, time can distort even truth, what the right thing to do is. Because later on, it'll be questioned, did Bhishma do the right thing there? He then forms a relationship, a mother-son relationship with Satyavati.
The intimacy they are sharing, I mean, it's completely platonic, and
Yes.
it's the respect, the intimacy, and it's almost this tragedy.
Just reiterate, it's a platonic intimacy, but it's basically like a burden that they shared, basically, right? And had to navigate together. So to me, this is the emotional spine of the book, in my opinion. For me, it was the emotional spine of it. And the hardest thing I wrote as well. They are bound by an impossible knot. She's the reason he gave up everything. And he's a son she gained by costing him his future.
When you're reading the book, there are some things that could be questionable. Maybe they are bringing up heirs and they want to come up with heirs all the time. And right now we are kind of thinking quite liberally across the globe. How do you deal with this, especially while writing the book?
Well, when I was writing the book, I wasn't thinking about so much what was going on globally, because this is set in a period of time. So I didn't bring today's world into it as much. But in terms of how it's relatable to the reader, I mean, if in English history, Henry VIII was obsessed with having a son to keep his lineage going. Right?
Yep.
To the point that he created a new religion, the Protestant religion, to make that happen. Prior to Shantanu being king. Prior to that,
Yeah.
their ancestor was King Bharat, which India is named after. It's India's Bharat. Why was he named king? Because he didn't give any of his own children the kingdom. He gave it to somebody else that was worthy of it. The relationship between Vyasa and with Satyavati,
Yes.
that I found the most difficult to write about. I've said that a few times, but I really mean that. There's very little information about the two of them prior to him coming to Hastinapur. She gave birth to him. She gave him up to a sage where he was raised. He was obviously a Mahatma, meaning he was a very great soul, like the terminology used with Gandhi.
Yeah.
And in many sources, actually, he's known as Bhagwan Vyas.
Dhritarashtra, who is, I mean, you write quite, in detail that how he is not in the zone and he's almost acerbic, and Shakuni has found this, he's manipulating him constantly. And of course, this is quite a slow burn where the repercussions would be in the future.
So Shakuni is not a fan of Bhishma, Pitama. He's not a fan of him. Shakuni was basically annoyed with Bhishma for offering a blind man for his sister. I think that if people, the readers need to be careful that what they're reading is checking how much creative freedom it's taken. Satyavati is taken as little as possible. Okay, there's one character called Salati who I added into the book, I've made up because I needed somebody to see things when she wasn't there.
Hello, book nerds. Welcome to the Booknerds Podcast. I'm back with an awesome author today. It's Rupeen Popat. He has written this amazing book called Satyavati. And boy, it was such a ride for me. I read it in a couple of days and it was like, I was, so fascinated by this story, which has not been kind of, at the forefront and at the center of discussions around Mahabharata. We have never been exposed as millennials in India. We have never been exposed to this. Maybe an odd mention here and there. And I'm so glad Rupeen has written this book and done very good justice to this narrative. I'm so happy. This book is super engaging. And of course, I'll share more of my opinions during the podcast. First of all, Rupeen, welcome. And thank you for writing this book.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a real pleasure. And, with regards to the book, it was nothing short of a pleasure to write. It was really a labor of love.
I know you have been doing this for a while. You are, if I'm, I would want to use the word obsessed with the Mahabharata. You have been reading these stories, and you have been absorbing these stories throughout your, growing up age. From 90s, the late 90s. Is it?
I mean, I first got into the books and the stories probably in the mid 80s, actually. So since I was about 3 years old, it's just been forever part of my life. They used to be, it started out as stories that my mother would tell me as I'm going to sleep, essentially. But then, since the 90s, I've been actively trying to learn more about it and understand it better.
It's crazy. Would you like to mention the sort of tipping point, the inflection point where you were like, okay, I need to learn more about this? Because not all of us had that experience, and I'm unhappy about it because why not? Why not?
So it's difficult to explain when there was a tipping point because I'll go back to when I was really young, when I was 3 years old, and I was with my dad's younger brother. He was babysitting me, and he took me to the babysitter's house. And I said, hold on a second, doesn't the babysitter normally come to our house? He goes, no, this is a special babysitter. All right. And then I meet the babysitter's older brother and family, and they're all questioning my uncle. I didn't know what was going on. And then my uncle goes, oh, meet my nephew Rupin. He knows the Ramayana.
Okay.
So he put me at the front to impress my future auntie's family, and I'm telling them stories about the Mahabharata, about Hanumanji, and just impressing adults, basically. So, from a young age, I knew that I was blessed to know the stuff quite well. I enjoyed watching the TV serials in the 80s.
Yeah.
That Ramanan Saga did, and also what B.R. Chopra did with the Mahabharata on Doordarshan. That came over to the UK, and actually in the UK they were showing. We only had 4 TV channels back then, right? This is pre-digital, right? So you know the Mahabharata would get a Saturday afternoon slot on BBC Two, and I was like, wow, like, this is actually like the whole country's is into this story. It was, at a young age, the Mahabharata was a lot more complicated. So I stuck with the Ramayana until I was about 10 or 11.
Right.
And then I was watching I had a lot of Amajitra Katha comic books, right? So I'd use those stories. I'd use stories that other people told me. And I'd typically, rely on the TV serials that my same uncle would go and buy me once a week when it was released. So that was my starting point there, and it was just for me. It was actually just really enjoying stories and actually realizing that there's a new layer every time I go into it. It's not the same. There's a new character. There's a new question mark, and it's never ended. And I don't think it will end. That's the beauty of these epics in the Hindu religion, basically. That these stories are universal for everyone to enjoy, but they're just really cool stories if you're not religious as well.
Yeah. I am in that sort of mode this month. This month is just like that. It has just started, but it has been like that since May, because I was reading about what happened after Kurukshetra and how, what happened in Dwarka and how it submerged. I was reading about that in a separate book, and now it's Satyavati. So it's amazing for me because, exploring these epics, there's nothing more interesting, to be honest. It's so much fun. And whether you're religious or not, it's just fun.
They're just fun stories, right? I mean, in the last 15 years, Marvel has had a big shape in TV cinema. And these larger-than-life characters that are helping people, superheroes, and then overcoming, a villainous challenge. These are universal stories, and it's never been more popular than it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's come to Satyavati. And
Sure.
she is just a fisherwoman. She's just rowing her boat every day. And it's I love the way how calm the narrative is in the beginning, and everything is, just very calm. If you visualize it, it's very beautiful. It's amongst nature. And, she transforms into this queen who needs to take care of this big kingdom,
Yeah.
Hastinapur. And, there is so much responsibility. She doesn't have any experience, to be honest. She doesn't have anything to go by. Why did you choose this character? Because there are so many, right, out there. So
There's
why
so
this?
many characters in the Mahabharata. What I would compare the Mahabharata to in terms of the depth of the characters and the richness of the story is probably, in today's world is like Game of Thrones. But what drew me to Satyavati in particular as a character, because there's so many to choose from, is that most of the time she's the plot device, the fisher girl who marries a king and triggers Bhishma's vow. And then the narrative really goes upon the men and, what happens there. But she's actually the great-grandmother of both the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and every figure in the war that descends comes from a choice that her father made at the riverbank. And I find it extraordinary that the woman that's the root of all of this has almost been left voiceless in the story. And what felt unsaid was the interior life, the cost of the choices that she made. We know what she did, but we never asked what it was like to be her. To be plucked from a small life and handed a throne you didn't ask for, carrying guilt for a sacrifice a young man made on your behalf. I wanted to write her from the inside, in the first person, so the reader lives inside what waits, inside that weight, rather than observing it from a distance.
Absolutely. It's, when she meets King Shantanu, that entire sequence, it's so amazing, with the moments they're having. He's just coming to her place and, meeting her quietly. Of course, her father is there, but they are kind of escaping his gaze somehow, in the beginning at least. But tell us more about this, the initial interactions. It was very interesting for me to read. Very sort of old school, romance, not saying much, all of that going on. Tell us more about those parts.
So I think that this is more so to do with Shantanu, right? I didn't want to portray him as a foolish old man chasing a young woman, right?
Okay.
I mean, before that, essentially, this is a true love story. My father, who read this book, isn't exposed to the Mahabharata and doesn't know the story of the Mahabharata very well. And when he read the first 5 chapters, he goes, "Wow, you've written an amazing love story." I was like, "Okay, I think you need to read a bit more than that." But essentially, this is a man that's already lost his wife. He's watched his children taken away from him. It's somebody who recognized that Satyavati is his last chance of feeling whole. And I wanted to give him like like a real tenderness early on. The joking around the hornbill, the way he helps her into the boat, so that when he withdraws and falls apart later on, the reader mourns the man he was rather than laughs at him, which I think has happened in the past. His tragedy is that he gets what he wants, but it destroys him because his happiness was purchased with his son's renunciation, and he can never really forgive himself for that. So that to me was, I thought would be a core part of the book. But also, like, I think that Satyavati defends Hastinapur precisely because everything that has gone wrong. The motivation for her isn't actually ambition by then, it's actually more responsibility. So she made a vow to protect this kingdom, and she keeps making the next hard decision and the next, often getting them wrong even, but because the alternative is to abandon the people who now depend on her. I wanted to show her courage isn't the absence of being overwhelmed, it's continuing
Yeah.
while overwhelmed.
Yeah. The other relationship that was so fascinating, and it's the amazing Bhishma. And his story, I mean, the origin story, I have not read about it. So I was having a moment because, I didn't realize how amazing, and he was a demigod. I mean, I wasn't aware of about most of it because, in the Mahabharata, he's kind of done basically. And even after whatever I've read of the Mosala Parv and, whatever happened after that, he's just, not at his prime. Let's call it that. So when
Yeah.
I read this, yeah, he is quite something. Tell us more. What's your opinion of how he was, the way he was? And of course, we won't be giving spoilers because there is a spoiler at the end, kind of. So we won't be talking about that. But again, tell us more about Bhishma and what's happening in the narrative.
So Bhishma is the crown prince. He's the definition of what you would call the people's champion. Okay. He was basically very well educated in every art, political, and how to rule. As a warrior, he was second to none. Absolutely none. Okay? There's nobody on earth that could rival him in his youth in particular. And he was the ideal choice to be a king. And that for various reasons that doesn't quite work out, which you can read in the book. But he's a very tragic individual. And as the story develops, later into the Mahabharata, when we get towards the war and stuff like that, you can see that he makes this particular vow, and it may make sense it may make somewhat of sense in the early days, but sometimes that time can distort even truth, what the right thing to do is, because later on it'll be questioned: did Bhishma do the right thing there? Right? Because if he was the king, there would have been no Mahabharata, there would have been no war, it would have been a happy story. But that was never destined to be. It was destiny had other plans. But then also, he then forms a relationship, a mother-son relationship with Satyavati, and that to me becomes very interesting. Would you like me to go more into that into that relationship?
Yeah, why
So,
not? That was my follow-up question, actually. I wanted to learn
okay,
more about the intimacy they are sharing. I mean, it's completely platonic, and
yes, yes,
it's the respect, the intimacy, and it's almost this tragedy. I mean, I don't know if you want to reveal that,
I
but
can reveal
we
stuff
can if you
because
want to.
there's so many layers in this.
Yep.
To give the surface layer doesn't kill the story. There's so
Yeah.
much to it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
in this type of story. I think it's not the destination, getting to the end of the book. It's the journey of it that matters, really, right?
Yeah.
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 So I
Yeah.
think that
So the vow that is, I mean, there are several vows in this entire narrative, but the first one where Bhishma and he was called something else back then, but he was
definitely,
kind of
yeah,
renamed. Yeah, but it's quite tragic. So this intimacy between Satyavati and Bhishma, talk
yeah.
us through that.
Yeah, so I'll just reiterate, it's a platonic intimacy, but it's basically like a burden that they shared, basically, right? And had to navigate together. So to me, this is the emotional spine of the book, in my opinion. For me, it was the emotional spine of it. And the hardest thing I wrote as well. You know, they're bound by an impossible knot. She's the reason he gave up everything. And he's the son she gained by costing him his future. There's profound love there and profound guilt, and a love that can never be named because of what they are to each other, mother and son by circumstance, equal in wisdom and something else underneath that neither will say out loud. I navigated it by keeping it almost entirely in the unsaid. They counsel each other, they protect the same kingdom, they share a grief that no one can understand. But the deepest feeling lives in the spaces. A finger brushing a cheek, a goodbye that stops just short. I wasn't the reader to feel that the two people have actually would have chosen each other in a different life to navigate these circumstances together. So the ending is built entirely on that type of mother-son restraint.
Yeah. So the one part where I was the most excited was with the sage, the great sage Parshuram,
Yeah.
fighting, Bhishma. And I thought that, oh my God, this is not happening. But it did happen. And all hell broke loose. And there was Amba at the center. And that is
Yes.
why it was happening. But I wanted to know whether it was just Amba or there was more brewing under the surface. Maybe there was something else to it as well. For that kind of wrath, they are unleashing on each other.
So I think that, I mean, for those people that know Bosholam as a character, he's a very old character. He's in the Ramayana as well, and even before that, he predates the Ramayana quite easily. He's been around for a long time. He's got a reputation in the world, and Bhishma was his favorite student and his best student to date. And a teacher's only as ever as good as their student is. A teacher's not a successful person if their students aren't. If the students aren't elevated. Bhishma was the most elevated there is. So Bosharam's reputation as a teacher was the highest there was as a result. And Bosharam felt as though that he didn't. He left a bit of a warrior moral code behind and disrespected Amba. And that doesn't go in line with the teachings that Bosharam taught him. And if he won't put it right, then Bosharam wanted to teach him a lesson. But this is a Guru Shishya relationship here. It wasn't other politics brewing underneath. They were both extremely fond of each other, and they both took a different. Bosharam didn't challenge Bhishma to a duel very easily. He did it. He did it emotionally, and Bhishma did not want to fight his guru. It's the last thing he would have wanted to do. But when he had Guru Adesh, when he was ordered to do so, he had no choice. He did so very reluctantly, and it was very emotional for both of them. For those people that can understand a Guru Shishya relationship, it's like a mother and a son going to war
Yeah.
on a battlefield, and you can't imagine that happening, right? So it was a very emotionally charged, but it was, Bhishma basically prioritized his vow over the well-being of this woman who had been kidnapped essentially and held against her will, and potentially forced into marriage against her will, but that didn't happen. But there's Bhishma is the one that abducted her, so it was his job to make it right. Yes, he was representing his brother, the king. He was there as a representative. It's a very grey area, and one that Bhishma himself, I feel, looked back on with regret in his life. But again, his vow came first. Should it have? That's for the reader to decide.
I think he lived by honor. So I mean, he said no to everybody. I mean, of course, when the readers read the book, they'll understand the entire context, because then it's more wholesome to kind of understand
Yeah.
how his head is. Where is his head? But yeah, there is so much procreation going on in this book, and sometimes forced, and even Satyavati is involved, right? And you know, when we are reading this book in 2026, it feels kind of very strange and odd because we are at a different place in terms of civilization. How do you deal with it? Because when you're reading the book, there are some things that could be questionable. Maybe they are just wanting to kind of, elongate their entire. They are bringing up heirs, and they want to come up with heirs all the time. And right now, we are kind of thinking quite liberally across the globe. How do you deal with this, especially while writing the book?
Well, when I was writing the book, I wasn't thinking about so much what was going on globally because this is set in a period of time. So I didn't bring today's world into it as much. But in terms of how it's relatable to the reader,
Hmm.
I mean, if you know, in English history, Henry VIII was obsessed with having a son to keep his lineage going, right?
Yep.
To the point that
Yep.
he created a new religion, the Protestant religion, to make that happen. He did the
Yep.
first public divorce with Catherine of Aragon. He even beheaded his second wife in order to seek a male lineage. So, okay, the Mahabharata was 3,000 years ago, call it 4,000 years ago, whatever it might be, right? Henry VIII was only 500 years ago in comparison, like 10% of that time. So it's still been happening in modern days. Now, today, you know, the British royal family, for example, has a lineage going on. It's not a worry for them, but if they didn't have a king, or if Prince William didn't have boys or girls or any children, then the situation with Harry might be very different because he would be next in line, right? So I think that today, I mean, just using the British royal family as an example, I think that things, if the circumstances were different, then over here things would be different as well. So it still happens,
Yeah.
but essentially, I think that Satyavati and Bhishma's real goal was keeping this kingdom safe and keeping the people safe, keeping the kingdom safe, keeping the values upheld. And prior to Shantanu being king, prior to that, their ancestor was King Bharat, which India is named after. It's India's Bharat. Why was he named king? Because he didn't give any of his own children the kingdom. He gave it to somebody else that was worthy of it. He didn't. He said the king is there to serve the people, and my children won't serve the people in the best way that they deserve. He was quite critical of them and honest about the situation. Therefore, he gave the kingdom to somebody else that wasn't his biological heir.
Oh,
Right. So that's why he got Bharata's name Bharat, because he made that sacrifice for the benefit of the people.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that was the rule of law that should have been upheld by kings going forward. That the best candidate, right, should be the king, not necessarily the eldest child. Yes, typically the eldest child, if they're a good enough candidate. If they're flawed, start looking. They don't automatically have the rights. And Shantanu was not the eldest son. He had an older brother that went off to the forest. Okay, as well. But that's not in the book, I don't believe, right?
I know. It's previous to that, but glad that you told us about this because we are really kind of, breaking down even how things are right now. We have learned from all these epics, and that's a great point that if the person is good enough, then you look at him,
So with Shantanu, his major guilt was Bhishma's not going to become the king, but also equally that the new heir is unborn. How can we judge his worthiness? How do we know if he's good enough? He's the king that made an heir without checking the worthiness, and that is blemished on him now. And it was done against his will as well. Right? He would not have chosen that path. In fact, he didn't choose that path. He walked away from the situation. Right?
Yeah. In fact, on that count, there's this sort of parallel track where Satyavati and the relationship between her son, Sage Vyas, and, later on, there is a parallel with Kunti, and, there is a boon also, which is going to happen later in the day, which is going to dictate how we are right now. It's crazy how things connect over, time periods over 25, 30, 40 years. Tell us more about this, the relationship between Sage Vyas and Satyavati and what all is happening and this connection with, Kunti.
So, okay, so let me just correct a couple of things there. So Kunti had a boon.
Yes,
She had a blessing. That was separate to what Vyasa and Satyavati happened there.
absolutely.
It was something. It was similar circumstances where
She was talking to her.
Satyavati had a child outside of wedlock. Kunti had a child outside of wedlock.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
who becomes Karan, right?
Yeah.
So they had that in common, and they even confided in each other in secret. which is something that actually I discovered while writing the book. That's not something I was aware of actually. So
That's crazy. That's
while I
crazy.
was while I started again and started
Yeah.
writing and doing, and
Yeah.
I said to myself, yes, I know these things. I've got enough content, but let me just do more research and just see if I find anything else that I think would be true.
Mm.
And I thought that was quite interesting. The fact that they were able to share that information in common, and it shared that they had a trust with each other, they had a bond with each other.
Mm.
I think Satyavati trusted Kunti as the next queen because Satyavati becomes the queen mother
Yeah. Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
So she's that she's that matriarchy elder who's passing down her wisdom and experience down to Kunti. So they had a somewhat of a bond. And were you asking me about the relationship between Vyasa and with Satyavati?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That I found the most difficult to write about. I've said that a few times, but I really mean that. There's very little
Yeah.
information about the two of them prior to him coming to Hastinapur. She gave birth
Mm.
to him. She gave him up to a sage where he was raised. He was
Mm.
obviously a Mahatma,
Yeah.
meaning he was a very great soul, like the terminology used with Gandhi.
Yeah.
And in many, many sources, actually, he's known as Bhagwan Vyas. He's given the name Good Lord as well, even though I think he attained that by being a man. So he was, a higher being. She was kind of a vessel for him to be born. And she was very young when she had him. And I think that he always respected her as a mother, but they didn't have that much interaction because he took the life of, of priesthood essentially. So leaving your biological family behind was quite normal for somebody in
Yeah.
that position. But he, when called upon, he was there for his mother,
Yeah.
right? She was obviously very fond of him, but she also had to use him as well when it suited her as well, right?
I know. I know. Of course, it was so blatantly, I mean, it is just what Satyavati was doing. I mean, she would go to any length to, preserve this kingdom, right? But I
She had
think,
to. Who else was there, right?
yeah,
Who else
I
was
think he
going to
was
do it?
kind. He was very kind, I must say.
Yeah, he was. He was. He was. I think that it's similar with Kunti and Karan, which isn't in this book as well.
Mm.
That Kunti went to Karan when she needed something as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
something that happened. It's
Yes.
something. It seems to have been a common thing.
Yeah. It's a common theme. I think the guys are very kind, I must say.
Well,
Well, not every time, but
I think
okay.
it'd be interesting to see what a woman would say here, or a mother would say in the situation, because a mother might say that she was forced to give up her baby,
Yeah.
and the trauma that would leave on a woman
Yeah.
would be quite difficult. And then she had to navigate treacherous waters, learn how to become a queen, and when there's no lineage,
Yeah.
guess what? Her long lost son can actually be the solution here. So,
Absolutely.
I, you know, it, but history has taken the negatives almost here. But on
Yeah.
the flip side, there's also stuff. It couldn't have been easy for her either.
Absolutely. In the second half of the book, Dhritarashtra, who is, I mean, you write quite, in detail that how he is not in the zone and he's almost acerbic. And Shakuni has found this, he's manipulating him constantly. And of course, this is quite a slow burn where the repercussions would be in the future. Tell us more about this, what he's up to.
So, what Shakuni's up to? Okay, so
Yep.
Shakuni is not a fan of Bhishma, Pitama. He's not a fan of him. In
Right.
some writings, there's talks of a war that happened between Gandhar and Hastinapur, and that Bhishma imprisoned Shakuni's father. There's so many different versions around Bharat that there's not one story of it. There's so many variations of it, right? I didn't buy into that as much, and I think the mainstream is that Shakuni was basically annoyed with Bhishma for offering a blind man for his sister.
Yeah.
And he felt as though that his sister, who he loved dearly, had been robbed of sight and life, and th- she disabled herself, and she blamed Bhishma for that, for not
Yeah.
offering Pandu and offering Dhritarashtra.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
also blamed his father for accepting it and saying yes, he wasn't a fan of his father either. So he was a bitter man, and he
Yeah.
was extremely calculated. He was a gambler, so he would always calculate his moves. And he wanted to hurt Hastinapur as a result, the kingdom that came knocking for his sister. And he knew the best way to do it would be through Dhritarashtra and eventually Duryodhana as well. And in the Ramayana and Mahabharata, the two of the biggest villains, the biggest villain of the Mahabharata is Shakuni, in my opinion, and the biggest one by far, then Dhritarashtra.
Yeah.
But in the Ramayana, Manthara is the one that uses her tongue to speak in KK's ear.
Yep.
And as a result, Ram goes to Vanvas for 14 years. It's the
Yeah.
tongue.
Yeah.
Again, Shakuni is using his tongue here with Dhritarashtra,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that is actually the most powerful weapon in this in this story, despite all the divine weapons that are available.
Yeah.
Right. So Shakuni just did a slow burner here. Yeah,
Yeah.
took a slow burner, and he wanted to make the maximum impact. But he wanted to make sure, one, that Dhritarashtra would become king and not Pandu.
Yeah.
All right, which
Yeah.
wasn't in his hands and happened anyway, to some degree. And he wanted to make sure that his nephew Duryodhana succeeded
Yeah.
the lineage. So
Yeah.
that was his underlying goal, and he worked very hard at it. Which more of that comes in the next books. So yeah.
It's crazy how relevant that is, even now, that you know the tongue can do so much damage, and even the pen. So it's crazy what he was up to. But I feel that, when I look at it now as a millennial, when I read these epics, read about them, I feel that I was quite judgmental when I was watching those, shows back in the 80s, 90s. I feel everybody has got their reasons to do something. They have their own reasons to do something evil or good, whatever, if you can call it that. What about you? When you keep on researching this, have you been surprised, like you said, that you were not aware about, Kunti, and Satyavati confiding in each other? So were you surprised anywhere else as well?
Yeah, I've had some more surprises. Yeah, even now, I'm still a student. Even though I've written a book, I'm still a student of these. So I'm still going to keep on learning more stuff and then discovering more stuff, because these epics have that many layers to it that it's not
Right.
one lifetime is not enough to study it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's part of the joy of it. The fact that I've got more to discover, there's more that I'm learning, and that happens a fair bit. And I've been enjoying that. I mean, one of the ways that I've been learning mostly has been from my guru Murari Bapu,
Yep.
who
Yep.
does kathas around the world and in India. I've learned a lot about the Mahabharata with him. I've been to Kurukshetra with him. I've been
Okay.
to Hastinapur with him. I've been to, and he's done various talks about Krishna, Karan, Draupadi, all of
Mm.
these characters.
Mhm.
I'm still learning more. And actually, when I was checking a lot of things about the book, like that incident with Amba and Kunti discussed their boons and the fact that they've had children out of wedlock, which is a big deal for the queen to tell the queen mother, right? It's huge, right? So they have to trust each other. I checked it with Bapu, and I was like, Bapu, I've come across this. And he goes, huh? He said, yes, that is written somewhere, and the two of them did have a relationship. But
Mhm.
that's not in the books or TV shows that we read about. So it was an
Oh.
opportunity for me to bring it to the forefront a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. For, the Gen Z out there who really want to discover their heritage and read about the epics, where should they start? Can you give some starting point, which could be easy for them as well? Of course, this book is there, but could you guide them a little bit? An easy guide, perhaps?
Oh, I've never been asked that before. You've caught me here. Let me try. Let me try. Okay.
Okay.
So I think that India's culture and history is so rich. It goes back maybe 10,000 years, roughly, at least, sort of thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's stuff that we can look about 500 years ago if you want to look at your heritage and roots. How
Yeah.
far back do you want to go? All right.
Okay.
For me, ancient India has always caught my attention a lot more than what happened 500. If you ask me what happened 500 years ago with the Mughals and all that sort, I couldn't tell you anything about that.
Yeah.
Right? My knowledge on that is literally zero. Yeah. So it depends what you want to know. But if you want to, what I did with my younger cousins when I was growing up
Mhm.
is we watched the B.R. Chopra and Mahabharata together as
Yeah.
like brotherly bonding time, and then we'd have a meal together. I did it
Yeah.
with a few of my cousins.
Mhm.
And they asked me, why are we watching this? And I said, well, look, we live in England. We don't have exposure to, we live in an English country,
Yeah.
okay, right? And I was born here. I am English in that sense, right? When, when England are playing a football match, I'm supporting England. But, our roots are Bharat, right? Our
Yeah.
ancestors for for millennia has been from Bharat.
Yeah.
And we have a way about doing things, and we have a very rich culture. We celebrate Diwali. Why do we celebrate Diwali? Because Ram Bhagwan was coming home.
Yeah.
We do Raksha Bandhan. Why do we do Raksha Bandhan?
Yeah.
Because Krishna and Draupadi had a brother-sister relationship, which is in this story.
Yeah.
So the reason why Raksha Bandhan happens, you're gonna learn why it happens,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and the story behind that. So sometimes, for millennials such as us, sometimes we do stuff because the elders say we need to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was that kid that questioned, why do we need to do this?
Hmm.
Sometimes they had answers. Most of the time they didn't.
Yeah.
Guess what? Today I've got a few of those answers now.
Yeah.
Right? There's reasons why these things are done, and some of it is actually done for no reason at all, and maybe should be dropped as well. Unnecessary chores in religion in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be simple, like essentially be a good person. But if you
Hmm.
want to really study the roots, then study the Mahabharata, study the Ramayana,
Hmm.
right? These two books, right, is our cultural heritage. It's the backbone to our society and why
Hmm.
we are the way we are today.
Yeah.
Right? And the lessons in there are still true today. They're fun stories with really cool characters.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned. That's what I'd recommend in that sense.
Absolutely. So many cool stories and so much fun. You talked about when we were not recording, you talked about creative freedom, and some people take too much creative freedom while talking about and writing these epics. What is your opinion on that?
I've got the utmost respect for any person that wants to sit down and write a book.
Mhm.
It's hard, and then to get it published and then to market it and then for people to enjoy it. If people are enjoying what they're reading, I've got no problem with that. I've not had any problems there with any of it. But when I was trying, I come to India a fair bit, and I was looking for a lot of books, and the Immortals of Mahula, which is a huge one in mythology, that Abish has done.
Yeah.
Back in 2009 or 2010, when I first saw that book cover in an airport, I was like, wow, I need to read that. It looks as though it's to do with Shiv. And I read it, and it was a lovely book, and it's successful, rightly so.
Mm.
But it took a lot of creative freedom. And since then, I think that paved the way for a lot of other authors to do this. And for
Right.
modern Indian audiences to have twists and new tales of these larger than life characters and put a new twist on them. Fine, it's clearly got its place in the market. But
Mm.
I was looking for books that told me stuff that I didn't already know,
Yeah.
that were sticking to the real story. And I
Yeah.
was really struggling, and that was a pleasure to read. And no disrespect to anybody else out there that's done stuff, but I
Mm.
was finding that difficult. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. Right? Let me put out there what I'm looking for. Right?
Absolutely.
Let me put
That's
it out there, and
yeah.
and hopefully people enjoy that. So I think I think that if people, the readers need to be careful that what they're reading is checking how much creative freedom it's taken. Satyavati is taken as little as possible.
Hmm.
Okay, there's one character called Salati who I added into the book, who's I've made up
Yeah.
because I needed somebody to see things when she wasn't there. So it's
Yeah.
to give a voice to the story a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's in that sense, I took creative freedom by putting in a charioteer who
Yeah.
happened to overhear something like
Yeah.
that. But I'm not changing the story arcs of major characters or what's happened there. So whereas other story, I mean, there was the production of the Ramayana made a couple of years ago where they took a lot of creative freedom and they made Vibhishan into an alcoholic. It's the
Yeah.
furthest thing from what he was.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
That
So
was
I,
crazy.
I
That
mean,
was
I'm
crazy.
not particularly that much of a fan of this stuff, but
Yeah.
it's clearly got its place in the market, and
Yeah.
there's an abundance of readers that enjoy it. I'm not trying to judge anybody else, and it's got its place. People are enjoying it. I'm very happy for the writer and for the audience
Yeah.
that are reading it. It's just not what I wish to do.
I think I am in your corner with this one. I like creative freedom with fiction, but I think this is, doing slight injustice to whatever has happened in
There's
mythology.
enough content with the real stories to give readers friction or build-ups and take
Hmm.
you through an emotional roller coaster, all right?
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you read the book yourself in 2 days, right? And I
Yeah.
mean, sorry, I know you're interviewing me, but let me ask you, how did
Yeah.
you find the emotion? What emotions did you go through while reading it?
To be honest, like you said, my favorite parts were featuring Bhishma and Satyavati, and those were the parts that require a lot of skill to write. And yeah, they had the most depth, and those are my favorites. And of course, the big fight between Bhishma and Parshuram, that was yeah, that was a fun moment. But otherwise, this relationship, I mean, it was just, I really loved it that even at 40, I am discovering so much about our heritage and mythology. I was so happy. The overall feeling was that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and of course, yeah, I'm looking forward to, what you are up to next. And what can you talk about it or?
Yeah, sure. So the plan is that Satyavati is the first book of four right now. We're thinking of doing three more and
Okay.
taking us through the at least to the end of Kurukshetra War.
Okay. Okay.
We've identified three. Well, the next book we've identified the character who we're writing about. Should I
Mm.
share it or should I keep it as a surprise? What would you like?
I think it's up to you. I mean, if
All
you
right.
can reveal,
Well, I'll
maybe
I'll
you can
share it.
reveal one.
I'll
Yeah.
share it. I'm a sharing
Okay.
individual. So
Oh, nice.
when I first read Satyavati, essentially I wanted to put some light on the females that are a bit understated, that are huge parts of the story.
Yeah.
So people talk about your Gangas, your Kuntis, your Draupadis,
Mm.
and a lot of people write about these people. And I thought, let me
Mm.
just take maybe a slightly secondary character, put
Mm.
shine some light on them and let them flourish a little bit. And we can still tell the story of what's happening, but maybe through their eyes.
Mm.
So the next one we're thinking about is Gandhari,
Oh, nice.
Duryodhana's mother.
Yeah, this is going to be super interesting. I had a feeling that you might choose Gandhari because you have touched upon her character a lot in the book, but we don't really know much about her even now. So
Well,
yeah.
we'll also be able to understand Shakuni a bit more through her eyes, I think.
Okay. Okay.
You know, one thing I learned about, one thing I learned with my guru Murari Bapu, I was in New York at a Ramkatha 20 years ago,
Hmm.
and he takes a manas, he takes a subject,
Hmm.
and he did the subject of Ravan. And he basically said in that katha, Ravan was the good guy.
Okay.
He's not the bad guy.
Okay.
He was actually an angel from he was an angel from heaven that was
Okay.
cursed to be born as a demon
Okay.
on earth, right?
No.
And Vishnu Bhagwan had said that he would come and take him back to heaven. So what Ravan said is that if you're going to come and deliver me, and I'm going to be a demon, means we're going to be adversaries. So in order to make your name greater and greater, Vishnu, I'm going to be the biggest, baddest villain I can be because the hero is only as good as the villain that they overcome. So
Yeah.
from the very get-go, Ravan was trying to elevate the name of Ram,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
people don't see that or know that. It's in the books, but it's brushed over. So essentially, I wanted to basically not make everybody into a hero, but I wanted to shine a bit of light on them. I
Yeah.
think everybody's a great character. You said growing up that you thought this character was good, this character was bad. And
Mm.
I'm trying to say that every character is not good and bad here.
Yeah.
Arjun did bad as well. Bhim did bad.
Yeah.
Yudhishthir did bad.
Yeah.
Draupadi did bad stuff as
Mm.
well. Now, they're not the villains, but
Yeah.
they're not blameless either.
Yeah.
They've done things as well. So it actually, every character is a different shade of grey.
Yeah.
Let's analyze what type of grey that is and let's go through
Yeah.
the ins and outs of it. That's what I'm trying to do a bit more.
Absolutely. That's another takeaway. You asked me earlier, and what are your takeaways? And I was like blank, but this is another takeaway, right? I mean, I have been, brought up like this is white and this is black, that sort of scenario. But, now I'm realizing that, when you're talking about it and while reading the book as well, it's all gray, like life.
I, and I think that's what, like life, I think that's what makes us, I think that's what makes it more relatable to you and I,
Yeah.
right? Like,
True.
I am not a perfect person. I make
Yeah.
mistakes. I do, I'll make mistakes. I'll do silly things.
Yeah.
As human beings, I don't think there's a perfect black individual, a perfect white individual in terms of characterness,
Yeah.
right? Everybody's grey.
Yeah.
You can't tell me you're perfect. I can't tell you I'm perfect,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So that's what makes it more relatable of a
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
My father, when my father first came across this book and he was reading the character of Duryodhan,
Hmm.
he said, well, Duryodhan's got a point. It's
Hmm.
not his fault that his father was blind and didn't get the kingdom. It should
Yeah.
naturally be going to him. Like he's got a point here.
Yeah.
And my dad and I was like, really, Dad? And he's like, yeah. There's well, actually, then if the reader is seeing that,
Yeah.
it has to be true,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. In the last couple of chapters, you explore all of that. And I think we should leave it at that because the reader should read the book and
No problem.
let, of course, Rupeen know how you felt about it. It's right here. It's out now. It's called Satyavati, and we're looking forward to so much more from you.
Thank you
This
so
is
much.
very on point. That's my
Well,
observation
thank
and
you.
my feeling, my experience.
It
Whether
was really hard for me because I'm a first-time author. I've never written a book before, or I've not done much writing generally. I'm a businessman in the UK, so the
I had
fact that
no clue. I had no clue that you were a first author. When I looked at the website, I was like, no, it doesn't feel like that. You were in control of the narrative. Let's call it that.
yeah,
So I think that's a big compliment for an author who is just starting out. And I'm sure in the coming books, you will be kind of going crazy with everything.
let's let's
And,
try.
and finally, the best thing was that anybody can pick up this book and not feel overawed.
Yeah,
That's something which I like. We talked about about Gen Z. If they're overawed by language or structure, they will
yeah. I
not.
wanted to make it easy to digest. I wanted to make it
Yeah,
sound like the way we're talking now, that
yeah,
somebody's talking to you and you
yeah,
can digest that. You know what I mean? I
yeah.
wanted to make it user friendly for people that know the story. There's good depth, and for people that don't know the story, it's not. It's quite user friendly as well.
It is. It is good for any sort of reader. So yeah, guys, pick up the book. Leave a review on Amazon. Good,
Yes,
bad, gray,
please.
whatever, whatever you feel like. Do let us know. And there is so much to learn. There are some other books coming up. Like, Rupeen has been kind to let us know that he's thinking about, bringing Gandhari to the forefront, shining some light. And those reviews matter to a new author.
Very much so.
Please do
Yeah.
that. Yeah, please
Yeah,
do that.
and also,
Mm.
I've got my email address on my website. I love interacting with my readers. If they want to
Sure.
talk to me about the book, people are
Sure.
welcome. Like, sometimes people think authors are unapproachable or we don't know who they are, where they are. If you email me, like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna want to talk to you about this. Right?
Just
It's my
say
passion.
just say the email, and of course we'll mention it in the caption as well. But be polite, guys. When you're emailing, just be polite, okay? You can ask anything, but be polite.
Inquiries at rupinpopat.com. So inquiries at
Okay.
RUPENPOPAT.com.
Ok- Okay, sure. And do send us the email ID as well. We'll put it in the caption also.
Thank you
So,
so much.
sure. Thank you so much, Rupin,
Thank
for
you for your
doing this.
time. Good talking. Thank you so
You
much.
you have made my summer a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to reading more of you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you.